we will get started. I will do a very quick introduction. So, hello everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are tuning in from. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you all here with us today. My name is Veronica. I'm Head of Sales over at This is School, and I'll be your host for today's session. So as you can see, we've got a very exciting speaker today, none other than Heidi Trude from Loudoun County, a true expert in language learning. Now, before we delve into the insights she's going to share with us, I just want to cover a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, a huge warm welcome to Heidi and a big thanks to everyone for joining us today. Now, to make sure everyone has the best experience, your microphones will automatically be in mute and cameras are turned off. If you have any questions at all or thoughts during the session, please feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A box, and I will do my best to answer them in a timely fashion. We'll also reserve some time at the end of the session, so please do keep those questions coming. And finally, just to let you know, we will be recording today's session. The recording will be shared with all of you next week. And you can then revisit the valuable insights that we shared today. So without further ado, let's get started with Heidi's presentation. Heidi, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Veronica, and a big thank you also to This is School. I am honored to be part of your first webinar series and looking forward to sharing with you this session and the 3 following sessions. So welcome, everybody. Good morning for those of you in the United States. If you're joining us from abroad, good afternoon, good night, wherever you may be tuning in from. I'm excited to have you here, and whether you're with us live or you're watching the recording, I hope you'll find this time valuable and that you'll get some new tips and tools and tricks to add to your assessment tool belt and into some new strategies for feedback as we begin this new school year. So excited to see you all, and let me just advance us forward. So we're here today for making assessments and feedback effective, engaging, and meaningful. And this is our first webinar, my first webinar, with This is School and their webinar series. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, which is some of you, I see some familiar faces here joining me live. So thank you. That makes me feel really good to know there's a few friendly faces tuning in. And those of you who I may know who are listening virtually, I'm so glad you're here as well. I am Heidi Trude. I am a French teacher at Loudoun Valley High School, which is located in Virginia, not too far from Washington, D.C. And I've been teaching French for the past 16 years. I'm also our department chair at Valley. And I was the 2019 ACTFL American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages Teacher of the Year finalist. So among a bunch of other credits and accolades to my name, that's the one I'll highlight today. If at any time you have questions during the webinar, feel free to reach out to me via email. My email is on the screen, but it's techietrude@gmail.com. You can also feel free to connect with me on X, formerly Twitter, at htrude07. I am also on Instagram at HLT2007. Or you can also interact and connect with me using my website, Tech with Trude, and all those are hyperlinked, and you'll have access to the presentation at the end of the session, and it will also be emailed out to you with the resources and the recording. So a little bit about me. Feel free to share welcomes in the chat, where you're from, etc., just so we all can start to build a sense of community here for our time together today. So our agenda, our plan of action for today, we'll share about our current teaching situation and look at what that might look like, what assessments and feedback might look like right now. Then we'll dive into how can we create more engaging and effective assessments. We'll look at some ways we can provide more meaningful feedback to our students. And then we'll dive into reflecting on what we've learned and what will our takeaways and our steps be moving forward. And if you have questions during the webinar, just as a reminder, you have access to the chat and you have access to the Q&A feature. So feel free to use either of those tools. If you pop up with a question at any time, you can put them there. And if you're watching the recording, just reach out to me via email or social media with your questions, and I'm happy to answer. So Objectives for today. By the end of the session, I can design effective and engaging assessments for my learners. I can explain the importance of meaningful feedback, and I can employ a variety of strategies to provide meaningful feedback to students in the classroom. So hopefully by the end of the session, you'll feel that we've accomplished all these goals. So we're going to start right now with kind of thinking whether you're starting a new semester, whether you're a year long, wherever you are right now in your teaching journey, I want you to, excuse me, reflect upon the question, what does assessment and feedback look like right now in your classroom? So think about what that looks like right now. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And you don't have to use the Padlet. I would like you guys just to use the chat. And if you could put in the chat for those on the recording, I put it on a Padlet, so you'll be able to access it later and interact with us. But for those of you live, go ahead and drop in the chat. I'll put the question back up. What does assessment and feedback look like right now in your class? Sorry about that, y'all. I've been getting over a bug and I still get the coughs from time to time. So go ahead and start sharing in the chat. What does assessment look like? What does feedback look like right now? So if you guys choose chat and make sure you select all participants, then everybody can see it. Hopefully. I am not seeing you all putting things there. Oh, Veronica, it says chat is disabled. So if we could get that enabled for them.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. Let me have
Give
a
her
little
2
quick.
seconds, y'all, and we will get these fixed for you. I am sorry about that, but think
Give
about
me 2
what.
seconds, Heidi. Okay.
Hey, no worries. You're good. Thank you all for your patience while we're getting that enabled for you. And we'll tell you when to try it, but just think about, this is giving you some think time as to what that might look like. Okay, so Jamie, I see your question came in. We have this on webinar feature just because of the number of attendees. So you won't be able to see other people right now. You'll just be able to see me or Veronica. All right, oh, Veronica is working on that. In the meantime, we could do it this way while Veronica is working on it, but yet you all, I can't drop your link, so. Ugh. You could, that's just gonna get a little messy if you answer in Q&A. We're working on getting you all access, okay? So hang tight. It's not something I can fix as the presenter. I'm waiting on Veronica, who's navigating for me in the back end to get things set up. Because if I put my link in the chat at this point, I don't think you all can see it either. Because my option is just showing between me. Yeah. So I can't even drop the link to you all. It's okay. We can come back to this, and while she's still working on that, it's all fine. I'm just going to jump in to be respectful of you all's time. So we'll come back to that, and I'll have you share when Veronica says we've got it working. So we're going to just dive right in, guys, and we're going to look at how we create engaging and effective assessments. So again, thank you for your patience as we're navigating this. So here in the United States, I know not all of you teach in the US. Some of you are teaching abroad. But for me, when I set up assessments in my classroom, I focus on the actful core practices for world language learning. So for those of you who are not familiar with those, I put the graphic up here so we're familiar. So we work on facilitating target language comprehensibly. We want to guide our learners through interpreting authentic resources. We design oral interpersonal communications tasks. We plan with the backwards design model. We teach grammar as concepts and use it in context. And we provide appropriate oral feedback. So the two that I'm really going to focus on today, actually three, I'm going to say 2.5-ish, that we focus on for me and for this session would be planning with backwards design model. That's how I plan every single unit, every lesson is I focus on backwards design. So we're going to really dive into backwards design for assessment. And then we're obviously going to look at providing appropriate oral feedback. So we're going to really look at those two, but we'll also look at communication tasks slightly because you'll see when I show you how I do assessments, you'll see that it may be different than what you currently think of as an assessment. So we're going to dive right in. The first way when you're thinking of designing assessments is you want to make sure you're using relevant themes, things that connect to your learners. So whether you're using the IB themes, whether you're using the AP themes, whether you're using the United Nations sustainability goals, you want to pick something that is real and relevant to your learners, because if they can connect to it, they're more likely to do well. They're more likely to be more engaged with that topic, etc. So you want to pick topics and tasks that relate to a theme that is relevant to your learners and who they are, which does require you to really know your learners. And that could be a whole nother session and a whole nother topic, but make sure your theme is authentic is the big takeaway that you need to have first. So for those not familiar with backwards design, we're just going to basically go through it. It's a good refresher for the start of the new year. So first, we want to identify our desired results. So in other words, what do you want your students to be able to do by the end of whether it's that one-day lesson, by the end of that unit, the course, a module, etc. So what is it you really want them to be able to do? Two, you want to determine what that evidence will be. What is that assessment? So how will I know, how are my students going to demonstrate what they've learned? What is that going to look like at the end? Then, once you've determined what that's going to look like, what that evidence will be, how they're demonstrating their learning, then that's really when you dive in and you start planning your learning experiences and instruction. So that would be like, what activities are you including? What material are you going to use? What resources might you pull in that will lead students to that desired result? Okay, so
Heidi,
you
sorry.
always, no worries.
2 secs, Heidi, that should be the chat window working now. Apologies for
Okay,
that. If everyone
perfect.
can just check that, that would be wonderful.
Yep, it's working. I can see everyone there now. So if you all want to message us now, just go to your chat and you can make sure you select everyone from the box. There we go. Perfect, Yasmin. Thank you. Yeah, so you can say who you are, where you're from, post your questions, share how you're currently assessing while I'm talking about backwards design. That's totally fine. So now you have that. No worries, everybody. We're all good. So thank you again, Veronica, for that. So we
No
were talking
problem.
about how we do our assessing. So again, you want those desired results first. So what is it that they will be able to do? In other words, for those of us here in the United States, your can-do statements, okay? What do you want them to be able to do? Then you think of, okay, how are they going to be able to demonstrate this? What is that end goal? What is that end assessment going to look like? And then you start planning everything else, the activities, the materials, resources, all the other bits, the things we do every day. We don't get to that until we know 1 and 2. So there we go. Another way you could think of this, and this comes from the Ohio Department of Education, and I absolutely love this graphic. Like, I think it is probably one of the best graphics to use when you think of backwards design and thematic units. I love their little honeycombs, and it just makes it very clear of the 3 steps. So your first step would be identify again. And that's where we look at those learning outcomes. That would be things like looking at our standards, looking at our unit themes. What is the proficiency level we're going for? What are our can-do statements? What are our essential questions? Once we know what all of those are, those 5 honeycombs or circles, then you move to your next honeycomb, which is that acceptable evidence. In other words, the summative, the performance assessment. Is it going to be an IPA, an integrated performance assessment? And if so, what is that authentic resource going to be for the interpretive task, the interpersonal and the presentational? And also, what are my rubrics going to look like? We've got to determine all of that before we move into the fun part of the planning, the really part where you get to be more creative. So I'm creative in step 2. That I love step 2. But where you really get to think of, ooh, what are all the other little bits and pieces going to be? That's the planning stage, and that's your instruction. So that's where you're looking at intercultural communicative competence, your language function. So what can kids actually do with the language? Your resources again, what technology might you use? What prior knowledge do my learners already have? What modes of communication am I targeting in this lesson? What vocab and structures and context will my students need? What higher order thinking skills will they need? What are my formatives going to look like? And what are those teaching and learning strategies going to be that I'll use? So this is a really great graphic, and you will have access to it, so you can like use it as you plan moving forward. So I heard this so this is what I learned. This comes from sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied this morning, y'all. This comes from Understanding by Design by Wiggins and McTighe. And I heard this concept when Laura Terrell shared, I believe it was at ACTFul several years ago. She shared, when you think of your lesson design, how do you actually design? Are you an activity designer, or are you an assessor? So when you think, I want you to really let that sink in right now. Are you an activity designer? Do you think like a designer, or do you think like an assessor? And when she said that, it really struck me, because I think prior to hearing her say that, I would say I was more a designer, but now I've switched to be an assessor. So an activity designer is you're thinking, okay, what's interesting, what's engaging, what would be interesting and engaging on this topic? What would be fun to do? That's thinking like an activity designer. However, Laura Terrell suggests, and I agree with her as well, we want to start moving ourselves to think like an assessor. In other words, what task would show me that my students really understand and can apply the new learning? Yes, I can make it fun. I can make it creative, yes. But what is really deep down, when you get to the heart of it, what is really going to make me know that my students understand and can apply the new learning, not just putting everything with bells and whistles and frills and sparkly things, but getting down to what would really show me that they understand. And that's where I made that switch from going from just an activity designer to being an assessor and thinking like an assessor. So if you don't take away anything else from today's webinar, hopefully you all will start to think like the assessor and kind of think not only what's interesting and engaging, but what can they truly understand and apply to their new learning. So if we start making that shift is what I would encourage us to do. So again, diving a little deeper to the assessor, what really is the assessor? Like when you're planning your lessons, you're sitting down, whether it's your Sunday evening, your Sunday afternoons, whenever you sit and you write your lessons, you want to ask yourself these questions. So what were the learners able to do as a result of the lesson that they couldn't do at the start? So before I even taught them this context, what are they now able to do, like that they couldn't do before we jumped into this unit? So what can they do as a result that they couldn't do at the start? And then your second question you're going to ask yourself is, what evidence do I have that they can do it? So what can they do now that they couldn't do before? And what is my evidence? When you can start to ask yourself those questions regularly, then you're thinking like an assessor and you're no longer the activity designer. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions? I see a lot of you greeting each other now, which is awesome. Welcome to everybody. Looks like we've got a lot of you joining from abroad, which is awesome. Okay, I don't see questions yet, which is great. If you do have questions about this, pop them in the chat and I will certainly answer. So, jumping backwards, there we go. What is our lesson design then, if we're thinking like an assessor? So again, step one is identify those desired results. So does the objective require the learners to use language as it's used in a real world? So am I designing something that's a real world concept, something they would actually do in real life? What is my acceptable evidence? So what can they do as a result that they couldn't do before? That's going to be my evidence. And then what experiences will get us there? So what do I need to do? What do I need to incorporate? Okay, what are we doing? What's the purpose? Is it just for fun and games? If so, that's probably not going to lead us back to step two. Is it going to focus on interpersonal communication? Is it going to focus on the presentational mode? So what am I looking at? What am I doing to make sure I'm going to get to the point where my students need to be? These are all the steps I go through when I'm doing my units to make sure that my learners, by the end of the unit, when they take whatever that assessment is, they're going to tell me at the end, this was easy. This was a breeze, madame. I knew this. Like, I felt very well prepared. Like, we're doing district assessments actually right now in my school, like this week and next week. And my students are doing their interpersonal speaking task right now. And they're like, this was so easy. Like, I'm not even worried about it. Like, because we've done so many interpersonal, so many communicative tasks that when it comes to the actual assessment, the kids don't even feel stressed because they're like, we've done this before. This is familiar. And I mean, that's how they should be feeling about an assessment. They should feel like low stress, not as much pressure because they've been well prepared for it, because you knew what that end result was at the end, or sorry, at the beginning. So the why again do I do backwards planning? Because A, it helps me maintain focus. It also helps the students maintain focus. Second point, I can edit my curriculum while I'm teaching. If I see that we're not getting a concept or we need to take a step back and work on some more pieces, master a few skills, I can do that. I can also prioritize my content for my students who need modifications. So I can differentiate my instruction if I know what my end goal is. I can differentiate for kids who may need a little more practice here or there. I can also add in scaffolds and supports for each individual student, so I know that he or she will be successful in whatever that content is and whatever that activity is. Also, I'll know when it's time to assess because I know what my end goal is. I know what evidence I'm looking for at the end, and I'll know they're ready because we will have done all these other activities leading up to it. So the kids will know, and I'll know that they're going to be fine. They're going to feel confident. Yeah, there will still be those kids who may struggle, who may just have a bad day and not do as well. But I know that I've showed them everything. We've done all these different activities, all these different practices that lead up to it. So I know when they're ready because I have that evidence as well. That's why I backwards plan. It is the best thing ever. I highly recommend you backwards plan if you don't already. Give it a try. Trust me, it keeps me focused. My whole department, we plan together actually across the languages and backwards plan. So it helps all of us just really stay focused and tweak our activities as we go. So they're probably wondering, okay, Heidi, you use this backwards planning. What does it actually look like? So what would some assessments look like in my classroom? So we're going to dive in to assessments, but before we dive in and really look at some examples, and I give you some explanation on the why and the how, I just want to brief check to make sure we don't have questions.
We do have one, Heidi,
Yeah,
from Amanda Davis, and
yes.
thanks for that, Amanda. Her question is, with the time constraints of GCSE and A-level, where you don't have a lot of time for them to practice when doing coursework, what do you suggest?
Okay, so since I teach in the US, I'm not 100% familiar with GCSE and A level, but I would assume that's your British curriculum.
Yep, very
And
similar. Yep.
okay, and A level, I'm assuming, is similar to our novice level
That would be the
or
last
like
2 years at high
okay,
school.
got
So
it.
yeah.
Last 2 years. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I'm learning with you all as well. So let me take that back. So I would say lots of practice within class if it's possible, giving them opportunities for outside learning from the classroom. And I'm going to show you some tools that I use as well when we see some feedback. That actually falls in more of my feedback realm for instant feedback. And I think that will help you as well, Amanda. But if not, connect with me afterwards and I'll share some more strategies. So let's dive in and maybe this will help answer your question. So assessments, what do they look like? So the way I think of assessments too is, are we assessing for learning, of learning, or as learning? So 3 ways you can think of it with backwards design. So what does this mean? So for learning is your process. It's formative. That's all those activities that you're doing in step 3 of backwards design. So what little things are we putting in, whether it's even you just asking questions out loud, if you're working with a story, you're doing those comprehension checks, that's formative, that's for learning. If it's assessment of learning, that's going to be your step 2. What didn't they know, but now they know at the end of the unit? Those are your summatives. It's what they can now do. It's that evidence piece we're looking for at the end. And then assessment as learning, that's a reflective process. And that's something I really work hard on in my classes, is to give my learners a chance to reflect each unit. At the start of the unit, they make a goal for themselves, like what do you want to accomplish? How are you going to reach this goal? And how can I help you reach this goal? At the end, they reflect on what they're able to do. So simple little reflections. And that's also showing me they're setting goals for themselves. They're also understanding their learning as well and how they're learning, how they're improving, etc. So I know a lot of times we feel like we're short for time and we skip that reflective process, but it really is important, not only for you as a teacher, but for them as learners as well, and to allow them to share in that process with you. Okay, so for the teacher, what is our role throughout this? So our role when we think of assessment for learning, we're the facilitator in this case. We're the ones that are asking them those questions, putting an activity, giving them an activity where they're completing something, and we're able to spot check right there what's going on, who's getting it, who may need some more practice. Oh, maybe the whole class needs some more help with this, or that was just a little too complex. We need to revisit this, etc. That is for learning. Of learning, our role as teachers, we're measuring their achievement against the curriculum. So that is that summative where we're taking that evidence, that product, that project, whatever it may be that the students are turning into us, and we're measuring it against the curriculum. Did they meet our goals that we set up for this unit? And then as learning, again, this is the reflective process. We're asking the students those guiding questions about their learning. So just ways to think of it as you're going through backwards planning. What is your role? Are you the facilitator? Are you measuring their achievement? Are you reflecting? Like, take how they did, ask them to reflect. When I ask them to reflect, I take their reflections and I put that forward into my next unit. So to see what's going on. The why we do this. So why do I like this model? It helps me determine my students' needs. So where are they? Where do they need assistance? Where can I encourage them? Where or who might need more direct instruction? And in my school, we have a time, not only can they be in my classroom for their regular instruction, we also have a 40-minute period each day where I can bring students in for more one-on-one work. So if I notice while we're doing a formative that a student is struggling, I can invite them in the next day, or sometimes even that same day. If I've had them in the morning, early in the morning, I can bring them in later in the day to give them that individual instruction that they may need where they're missing a few gaps here and there. For the assessment of learning, Okay, so the students have now incorporated what feedback they've received during their formatives, and they've created whatever that, I say, final product is, whatever that final assessment for that unit is going to look like. It doesn't have to be a traditional paper and pencil test. It can be lots of things. And then your assessment as learning. The why would be you want to ask the students those questions so you know how they're learning, like how they're thinking. Because you want to see, like, how are they understanding this? Why are they thinking this way? Or you may even ask them questions of what activities did you enjoy most about this unit? What was most helpful that I did? How could I improve so you can progress in your proficiency journey? Things like that is so important. And it's so often that we as educators neglect that, but we need to incorporate it so our students feel valued and heard, and that we can incorporate activities and ideas that they really want in our classes, or that are really helpful that we might think don't help them, but actually they do. So don't skip that step. So we're actually looking at some assessments I use in my classroom. And these are actual assessments. When you get access to the resources, you can actually click these, they're hyperlinked, and you'll get copies of the assessments so you can use them in your own classes, just tweak them for your languages. So this was one that I use with our food unit and healthy eating. And for those who don't speak French, I'll just translate into English for you all. It's called the school cafeteria, basically. Okay, so are you going to be eating? So basically their goal is we're looking at cafeterias around the world because we want to make connections between not only our world, our community, but we want to make connections to the global world. So we all know students have opinions about lunch at school. So for this assessment, at the end of the unit, their task was to write a letter to the director of school nutrition to explain healthy school lunches in Francophone countries and how you want healthier school lunches in your own school. So this was for students who are at the novice high proficiency level. These were French 3 students, so in their third year of French. So their task was they were writing a letter, and I just made up a character name for Madame Mangevien. So Miss Healthy Eating, who works as our food services director in our county. And they had a template there on that Google Doc that opened and you can see it down here at the bottom. I gave them sentence starters to help them out because they're still novice, so they can benefit from some. Just giving them some starters, and then they had to come up with the reasonings why. So it was like, in my class, we're learning what people eat in the cafeterias. So in the French cafeterias and French school lunches, students eat da 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 da, and they explain what food and why it's healthy. And then they're like, our school lunches aren't that great. We need to improve. And then they explain reasons why. And this ties right into our healthy living unit. And they all get very heated and very engaged and really want to tell you everything about what is wrong with American school lunches. And for those of you who are abroad, you've probably seen pictures of American school lunches. If you haven't, just search the internet and you will see why our students get very involved in this topic. The kids love it. And at the end, this is an assessment for them because we've already covered and talked about this. We've written things about it. We've discussed, et cetera. And I'm going to break it down here so you understand the process of how it works, how we've done everything to lead to that final point. We've covered the interpretive mode, where they have examined school lunch menus and videos of school lunches from around the world. Then they respond to the questions I provide them or their classmates. Interpersonal, they're going to be working with their buddy, their partner, asking and answering your questions directly, relating to school lunches, and comparing them. How are they similar? How are they different? Like, okay, here in the US, we're eating roast chicken nuggets and French fries. Over in France, they have this nice, healthy, balanced meal, or et cetera, et cetera. Simple to find these images. You literally just Google school lunches around the world. You can find tons of images to use with your students. Then we move from the interpersonal to presentational. So now they're going to be working on a polished piece. This is their final assessment. They use the template in a graphic organizer that I provide them. And they're going to generate that letter to the school nutrition director on how to make their lunches healthier. They get a chance to revise and edit with peers. So we do a lot of peer editing in the class, as well as with me. They make suggested corrections, they revise, and then they submit their final draft to be shared with me. And then I tell them it goes to the school nutrition director to make it real, but the school nutrition director doesn't really speak French, but the students don't know that. They think it's going to a real audience because that makes it more relevant and engaging to them. So that is how I use this process with one assessment. I see there may be a question. Oh, hi, glad to have met you at Actful. Thanks. Cool. So that is one type of assessment. Another one I stuck with because I was sticking with the food unit because it's one that we just did recently was, and I will translate this one since it is written in target language because this was an actual prompt the students get because I do most everything with them in the target language. So this is a TV show, a cooking show. So if you've ever watched like Top Chef, Master Chef, any programs like that, this is like the concept that, and the students watch these shows here in the US. I'm not sure about abroad if they're really into watching cooking shows and things like that, but they are in the US. So this engages them right away when I tell them that you're going to be the host of a new TV show and you now have to make your first episode and you have to decide what is that signature dish going to be that you're going to cook on your very first episode. Obviously, since I teach French, I'm asking them to pick a French recipe. And they're going to share the details for making it. And then they present a video. And again, my proficiency level again is novice high. There's actually a screenshot down at the bottom of one of my students making their video. It was super engaging, so fun. They get this document, and I've linked it for you as well, but it basically outlines the project, shows them all their due dates, what is required of them. And again, it's scaffolded, so I provide them those supports. So by the end, they will have a nice polished product because they're going to do the recipe, share it with me. I provide them comments. They're going to write their script. They're going to share it with me and their classmates, peer editing, teacher edits as well, suggestions. And then once they have that script, they're off making their videos. And their video performance is their actual final assessment that they get with this unit. It has the rubric, everything. So when you click and you get the resources, you will get this project that you can take, this assessment, and you can do it in your class, just as I've done with my students. So to break it down on how I use that backwards design process, the first thing we do as a class is we start exploring Francophone recipes. If you teach Spanish, you're going to explore Spanish recipes. If you teach German, do German recipes, Chinese recipes. Whatever your language is, explore recipes in your target language using authentic sites. Okay, my kids, I'm like, no, you're not just going to Google. Like, I give them actual French recipe sites. We go there and we start exploring. Then they're going to decide on their recipe, something that's really interesting to them. Some of the times my students are like, I really don't want to pick from the website because my family is French speaking and I have relatives in France or in Quebec, and I would like to use a family recipe. If that's the case, honor that, honor their background and where they come from, and allow them to use a recipe that's special to them. Then they're going to write out their scripts using the recipe and using simple sentences at their proficiency range. That's the key thing. You don't want them going out and trying to write it in words that you know they don't know, or tenses, or in a complexity that you know is not them. So for my students, I tell them we're doing it in simple sentences in first person. I cut the vegetables and then I do this. So keeping it very simple. They then revise and they edit their scripts with their peers and the teacher. They practice and rehearse, and then they're going to record their video on their chosen platform, whatever works for them, whether that's Flip, whether that's iMovie, WeVideo, Canva, whatever. There's so many tools they can use. They get the choice there. So student choice goes there. Then they share it with the class and they all watch. We have a big watch party. They watch them together. They ask questions. So again, we're back to interpersonal mode. And then they vote on, okay, what was the most engaging video? What would be like our top chef? And we have a lot of fun with that. So that is another way I do assessing. So hopefully you're seeing you can do assessing, not just traditional fill in the blanks and pencil paper, that you can actually give them authentic tasks that are real and relevant, that still show you that they understand the content matter. So those are just two I wanted to highlight before we move into the feedback. So once we've assessed them, we want to look at what does the feedback process look like. So before I move on, I just want to pause. If you have any questions right now, feel free to drop them in the chat. And if you don't, that's fine. We'll move on to feedback. All right. So meaningful feedback. And this, people are probably gonna be like, this can take a lot of time. Yes, it can, but it's so important. So before we even jump into it, we're not gonna use the Padlet since we're here live. But for those of you watching the recording, you can do the recording. But in the chat, share a concern you have about providing feedback to your students. So what might be a concern you have about providing feedback? So go ahead and drop those suggestions or concerns or wonders in the chat right now for me. Remember, make sure you hit everyone. So it goes not just to me, but it goes to all the participants here today. Thank you.
Getting
Okay,
some
I
nice
don't.
questions in there, Heidi. Kids who are super sensitive. I don't want to encourage or discourage them, rather, that they will understand the feedback. Many students consider any assessment as one and done. Having time to give meaningful feedback.
All right, these are great, y'all. All right, you can keep those coming and I'll look back at them as we go, but these are all valid concerns. Like a lot of you, I'm seeing time, I'm seeing that one appearing multiple times. And also,
Absolutely.
and then I'm seeing like, I can kind of tie a couple of the other ones together that you all are saying as that they'll understand it or they won't understand it, that you give them the feedback and then they're like, whatever, I don't care what she said, or they don't even read it. But I'm going to hopefully some of these tips and tricks I share with you all will help you and them to realize that feedback's really important. It's how we grow. So let's dive right in, my friends. Let's go. Come on, slide deck. There we go. All right. So we all know this, but do our students all know this? Not sure. But feedback is critical. Like I cannot stress that enough. Critical. It is crucial for advancing our language proficiency, our language acquisition. We can't improve if we don't have feedback. So feedback is critical. Okay. And we should provide it in multiple forms, whether it's formative, whether it's summative, or allow the kids to self-assess themselves. Let them self-assess, like, can I do this? I have little check sheets that I give them, like, and they check off for me. It's like their exit ticket. I can, whatever my goal is, and the kids self-assess. That's feedback. Like if they're saying yes, I'm seeing like, or sometimes I do it as a ranking of 1 to 5. Like, okay, 1, I have no idea what we did in class today, madame. 5 is I've got this and I can teach the class. That's feedback for me. It's also feedback for them because it's giving them that affirmation of, I know what's going on. And they're pretty honest with it too. Like I do this almost weekly and the kids love it. And the first couple of weeks, it took a while getting them on board. But now they're pretty much into a little pattern of, yeah, how did I do this week? Okay, did I participate in class? Was I actively engaged? That's self-assessment. And we'll talk more about that. Okay, with our feedback, I saw concerns from some of us in example number 2, timely, and us having the time to do it. So hopefully I can share some tricks that will save you a little bit of time. Our feedback, we need to have it specific. It needs to be timely. Our feedback can be spoken or written, so it doesn't matter. whether you want to write it to them, whether you want to just give it to them verbally. And the key thing is it needs to be relevant to the learning goals or targeted level of the proficiency. If you write it in a way that your student is not going to understand what you mean, you're not helping them. It's going to confuse them more. And so make sure it's relevant and it's relatable to them. Like, make sure they understand what you mean. Because if they're not understanding what you're saying, they're probably not going to read it or care to read it the next time you give them feedback, because they'll be like, well, I don't even know what she wants. Or I don't care what he wrote because I don't understand what he wrote, because maybe he wrote it all in Spanish, not at my level, and I don't even know what he's saying. So make sure you write things so your learners understand what you mean, and it's not just negative feedback. You're praising them. We want to look for glows and grows. That's what I call it with my students. So glows, things they do well, and a grow, something they can improve upon. So always frame it in a positive mindset with your students. So for formatives, that's things that we're doing. Formative feedback is designed to assess their progress towards learning targets during the learning process. So that can be while you're doing any types of activities in your class. You're praising them. It may be a simple thank you for using Spanish today. Thank you for speaking in French. That was so brave of you. Like, especially with your novices, when they're just learning and they're just making an attempt to use the language, you want to praise them for that. They tried. They at least said something. So giving them that praise, and even if they're not verbalizing it yet, even if they're giving you a nonverbal gesture, which is fine when they're still learning, because we all know they learn and acquire at different rates. So if they've given you a sign that yes, they agree, no, they disagree, they understand, thank them for participating and sharing that they're with you. That's only going to encourage them more to keep going. So any type of feedback when they're participating, give them that feedback. Don't stop right in the middle and correct a mispronunciation, because that may shut them down. If it's something that you're noticing across the board, then yeah, maybe like, guys, let's take a quick pause and let's talk about this. Let's go back to it. Do a little pop-up grammar if you need to, but don't discourage them from trying, because they're going to shut down. You want to always lower their effective filter as you go. For summative feedback, so this is when they would be taking whatever that assessment was at the end. That's where you're going to provide them that in-depth feedback, most likely using whatever rubric that you've scored them on, and then providing detailed comments like, I really like how you incorporated whatever. That could be your positive, your glow. Next time, I'd really like you to try asking more detailed questions, or next time, let's focus on adding some follow-up points or adding more details into your writing. So really providing them with something they've done well and something to improve upon as they go through. And reflective, this is when they become the active participants. So they're going to be self-evaluating here. And this is letting them know it's their chance they can make changes to improve their language proficiency. So maybe next unit, I want to focus more on my writing skills. I feel I kind of was able to do this, but I could improve by doing, and let them say what they feel they can improve upon. So giving them that opportunity to reflect on how they did, reflect on where they are and where they want to go in their language journey. Obviously, we know the why. We know the kids need feedback because it's building ownership and it builds their confidence as learners. They also know what their strengths are and what they can grow on. So what weakness might they have? Some of them are going to be like, I need to speak more so I get better at communicating authentically in the target language. Some of them are like, I need to write more because I could really level up my writing if I did this, if I practiced using more of the strategies we do in our classroom. And again, without proper prompt feedback, they feel disconnected. So if they've had an assessment and they don't get any feedback, like within a week or so, even, or it's like a month later and they're getting feedback, they're not going to be as motivated to improve because they're like, well, that wasn't valuable clearly to me, or my teacher didn't get it back to me right away. Why should I care? So trying to get things back so they have that meaningful feedback, so there's not that disconnect, so they know, okay, this is what I can do to improve next time. This is what I can keep working on in class. This is what my goal is going to be for the next unit. That's why we do it. We're all wanting to grow and improve. Even as adults in our teaching profession, we want to always grow and improve as teachers. So we want feedback from our administrators when they come in and they observe us. The same thing for our students. They want that feedback so they can improve. Even if they may not show it to you or tell you they want it, they want the feedback. They want to improve. So, what are some ways that you provide feedback? So go ahead and drop those in the chat and share how you're using feedback.
I'll read them
So
out
what
to you,
are some
Heidi, as
ways?
they come in.
Yeah, go for it. That would be awesome. So just share in the chat. So what are ways you provide feedback or how you provide feedback? Because we can all learn and grow from each other here. You just want to list a strategy. If you want to list several. If you don't want to share, you're not obligated to share either.
There's actually an interesting piece of feedback here that was actually from our prior question, and that's from Jamie, who says time, but more importantly, really getting the students to read the feedback. She
Yeah,
uses reflections to encourage them to read the feedback, but sometimes she feels that about half the students disregard it all, and I'm sure that's something that's felt by everyone. From Audrey, she talks about mostly orally giving feedback, thanking them. Melanie,
generalized comments. That's awesome
absolutely.
as well. Love that one.
What went well, and even better if comments, corrections, written, i.e., spellings, grammar, mistakes, and
Yeah.
verbal feedback. Verbal while they're doing the task. I know that can be very, very effective. Sometimes after all students finish presenting, she makes generalized comments, like you just said, Heidi. Live marking and lessons, that was from Amanda. Tamara, she makes short grading sheets that have positive and negatives on a sheet, but that are called grows and glows, like you
Yep.
mentioned. She puts a
Awesome.
sticker on the sheet for some reason are more likely to read them because everybody loves stickers. We know
Yes,
that,
they
absolutely.
do. Even high schoolers, they will do anything for stickers, candy, anything. So make it fun. I would say these are great, and you all can keep sharing these, and I'm sure we can document these as well and maybe
Yep,
share
we
those
can
out for
save them.
those who are watching the recording so they can see all these strategies as well. So let's keep us moving. And you guys you could run this part of the webinar, y'all, on how you give feedback. So obviously a variety of strategies that you can use to inform your learners of their progress. And of course, it can be oral, it can be written, and in a variety of ways, because we all want to improve. We all want to get those glows. Heck, even adults want stickers. I mean, I'll do things to get a sticker. Makes me happy, or that affirmation of you've done well. I mean, when my principal comes in and evaluates, they're very good at my school of giving us like immediate feedback. Like they'll email us or send us something right after they've been in of, hey, I saw this in your class and I really liked it. And then the way they frame what you should work on, they're like, have you considered? And that's like a nicer way of saying, well, I didn't really see this in your classroom, or I didn't see this in your paper, but nicely framing it as, have you considered? And then you offer a suggestion. So just another way that you could do a reframe to say, well, you're really good at doing this, but have you considered whatever? So again, formatives, we know these, we provide them or we guide them. We're consistent, we're timely, and we're specific. We want to be relevant to our learning targets based on our learners' proficiency, descriptive. And I think the biggest takeaway I have for you all on this one is put it in student-friendly language. Because if the kids don't understand what you mean by that comment, they're not going to read what you say. They're not going to do that suggestion in their next assignment. So make sure it's geared towards them. Summatives, we do that at the end of that learning sequence, the end of that unit. They're seeing where we currently are, they're evaluative. And then reflectives are teacher designed, but they're learner driven. You could do this at the beginning of your unit. You could do it during a unit. You could do it at the end. Whenever you feel you need to get that feedback or have them take a moment and pause and think about what they're doing, what they're learning, what struggles are they having with something. Or if you're noticing in class one day, it's silent, they're not getting it, ask for some feedback and be prepared to take what they say and make some action on it. Like really think about it, because that's helping them become more aware of their own skills and where they are in their language acquisition journey. So put some of the ownership on them, allow them to take charge. At the beginning of the year, I always share with my students how we learn language. We spend about 2 weeks going through what is language acquisition, how do we learn it, why we do things the way we do in my classroom. And they understand the reflection piece so they can self-reflect as well and realize, okay, I'm here, I can do this, I could do this better, this is what I want to work on. So we really focus a lot on goal setting and deciding our hopes and dreams at the beginning, and not just the beginning of the year, but throughout as we go. And then reflective, different ways you can do it besides just doing simple surveys. You could have your students keep a portfolio all year. It could be written reflections. It could be through Google Forms or another technology platform. Could be peer assessments, evaluations, discussions. You could do it as exit tickets like I do. You could have one-on-one conversations with your students. Whatever you need to pick what strategy might work the best for you and for your learners because you know them best. And then my favorite way to bring in more feedback, besides me just writing feedback and giving them verbal comments, I like to build in technology because some of that can be very instant feedback to the learners on their progress, especially with formatives. So these are some of my favorites that I've listed, and I put their icons there. So you have, for those who aren't familiar, we have Pear Deck, great way, and I'll show you some slides that have info on each of them. Flip, awesome for feedback. Quizzes will give students instant feedback. Obviously, This Is School has built-in feedback right for our learners. GimKit, built-in feedback. And then, of course, all your Google tools has feedback available right within them. And I'll tell you a couple little apps and extensions you can use with Google that make your feedback even quicker. So Pear Deck, again, you can provide your students, if you're running a lesson with Pear Deck, you can provide individual feedback to students during your lesson, either synchronously or asynchronously. And the students receive a document at the end that has a copy of all their responses that they've put in, as well as your feedback. And it allows them to reflect on their learning. So if you're interested in diving more into Pear Deck, you have that link there that you could go back to after the presentation. With Flip, this is again an online video platform where the teacher can provide spoken and written feedback to students. You can also create video portfolios of the students to highlight their proficiency and their growth. And you can record videos to share with your students as well. For Google tools, again, you have so many opportunities here to provide written or spoken feedback, whether you're using a commenting feature on docs, whether the kids are working together in editing using the comment feature with either themselves or the teacher. They could use recorded feedback with Kaizena, or you can use Mote as well. M-O-T-E. Mote is a game changer. Love it because I can record right in a kid's document. Actually, pretty much anything within Google Tools. I can just pop in with recorded voice comments, much faster than writing, and then they go back through and they can listen. You can also create portfolios for your students as well to keep that feedback going. Other tools and apps for immediate feedback. Obviously, This Is School. When students are using the platform, they're getting immediate feedback on whether their answers are right or wrong. They're earning their peanuts, getting that instant gratification. Not only are they getting the right answer, But when they do their exercises, they get that instant gratification of they're earning something. To them, that means they get something, which makes them happy. So that's a great tool to use for feedback. You can also use the writing tool and a speaking tool in This Is School as well and score them. Gimkit, again, gamify your learning. That gives them instant feedback. Quizlet, again, they're getting their instant feedback. Same with Kahoot and quizzes. These are all games. Students love games because it gives them instant feedback and it's fun and engaging. Conjugamos, the same way, you can gamify it, or they can do the simple drills within the website and get that instant feedback. And then Blookit is another game platform where they can play various games. They know whether they're getting the answers right or wrong, and it's adding that element of fun into their learning as well. So when you need that quick immediate, like those formatives, these are tools and apps and websites that I highly recommend, because then you can take their scores and you can put them in your grade book. And then you have grades. Like, the kids never know. I tell them sometimes, oh, we're playing a Gimkit today. They're like, and they'll be like, okay, cool. And then at the end, I just generate the report. I see their score of how they did on the questions of whatever that content is. And that's a formative grade I can put in my grade book. Or I can make it a summative if I want, because in my district, we do formatives, we do minor, summatives, and majors. I can take any of these because it gives me the progress report right then and there. And I can just put that note into the grade book. They've already got that instant feedback. They know how they did. And that's saving me time. I'm not taking papers home and grading them and writing detailed feedback because these tools have given me that instant feedback. So that is a time saver for me. So if you don't use any of these already, I hope you will try at least one of them and check them out. Other ways you can do feedback would be doing small groups or meeting with students one-on-one. So obviously, if you're in-person teaching, then you would do that in class. If you're teaching still in a virtual setting, you could use Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, WebEx, etc., whatever platform you have available. You can also post feedback in your learning management system, whether that's Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, whatever your district has available to you, where you can have those individual conversations going back and forth with the student on their assignments. Those are a couple additional options you have. So I've shared a lot with you all, but I want you to reflect on what might be a new way that you might give feedback to your students. So what's something new you may wish to consider? So if you want to drop some of those in chat for me, what's something new you may wish to consider for your learners? I'm going to share that in the chat with us. There's something new you may want to try, whether that's using the glow and grow strategy. Maybe you want to try more verbal, maybe you want to try more writing, maybe you want to try technology, something like Kaizena or Moat. Go ahead and let us know in the chat and we'll share those out with you all. I see some results are coming in. Yeah, Pear Deck's great. Yeah, formative game reports, voice recordings. Yeah, Moat, I would highly recommend. I'm going to put it in the chat for you all, how you spell it. It can work. Moat, and it's free. It's game changer. And it's very easy to use. The kids can do it too. So you could have the kids add Moat or have your district add it for your students. And then you can they can write, just verbalize to you. So I'm seeing a lot of you saying, some of you want to look into more verbal. I'm seeing people like, oh, I already play these games. Why didn't I just think of that as feedback? Yeah. Verbal feedback using Gimkit and Blookits for formatives, absolutely. Easy way to do that. Yep, collaborative modes in the games. Yeah, verbal feedbacks are amazing, y'all. Like, it saves you time. Sometimes, even for myself, I just use Moat to make myself notes when I'm thinking, because I can think out loud a lot faster than I can write things. And then I just go back to it later when I want to actually like type out my ideas and make them more formal. So yeah, so for the game results, I would just put it in my gradebook and call it like game kit on whatever. So say we were reading a story, whatever the story was, comprehension on maybe Brandon Brown gets a dog or whatever, Brandon Brown wants a dog, and chapter 1. And I have questions in my game kit relating to the story events, and I would just call that a comprehension check, and I would put their score in. In my district formatives, we can put the score in, but it doesn't actually measure in the gradebook. I could explain my district's grading policies, but that would probably be very confusing to you all and make your head hurt. So, because it's very math-based. Lots of math, percentages of the number of things you have to have in the percent. Yeah, I don't want to make anyone's head hurt. So I will spare that part, but you easily just put it in as a grade, make it fit whatever category that you're using it as, and it'll work. Yes, you will be receiving the slides, Aya. Absolutely, you will.
I have one question in the
Yeah,
Q&A as well for you,
go for it.
Heidi. So Heidi, do you give a project at the beginning of each lesson? Do you actually teach that lesson, or do you give them a chance to do their own research with links or resources provided by you?
Okay, that is a great question. So typically it depends on my units. We typically don't start with the project at the start. We typically would start with the content and we move towards, because the project in that sense would be the end, showing me that they've mastered whatever my content is, whatever that topic is that we're covering. Now, yes, there are times where they will dive into a project where I'll tell them what it is. And yes, they go out and they do that critical thinking and they're going to do their research, etc. So yes, they have that opportunity as well. It just varies on the level of your learners and what your theme is that you're working with. So great question there. Thank you. All right, so we're almost done, my friends. So reflection time. So the reflection question, and I'll share it on my screen. You don't have to put it in the Padlet, but your reflection is, so reflecting on your assessment and feedback practices, I want you to share something that you feel you're doing well, or you share, and actually, I will drop it in the chat to make it easier for you all, because this is a lot of words to tell you all. So let me grab that link. I got it, and I will put it back to us. There we go. Let me pull that into the chat. There we go. So this is, you can self-reflect. This is your self-assessment right now. So you're going to reflect on your own learning. You don't have to do it now. You can click the link and bookmark it for later, but just thinking, what's going well for me in terms of assessment in my classroom? So I call it a rose thorn bud. So what's going well is your rose. What's not going well, or something you could improve upon, would be what is called your thorn. And then a bud would be your new idea. Like, what's a takeaway, something new you want to try with either your assessments or your feedback. So you can reflect on that on your own time. You don't have to do it right now. But that's just a way for you to think about your practices. And if you want to come back to it maybe later in the semester and be like, okay, I've tried some of these tips and tricks. Let me think on and reflect on this again. Now it's going well, etc. Just keep going back to it, because you're going to find, as an educator, you're going to evolve and change the more you try different strategies. So I'm going to give you that. Some other resources for you. You'll have access to all these, but there is a backwards design template. So when you're planning your lessons, you have access to work on backwards design. You also have some guidelines here for assessment and rubrics. I've provided you with templates to design IPAs. I've also provided you, if you're not familiar with Leslie Grawn, she is an amazing language educator. She's now retired. Well, she says she's retired. She's not. She is amazing. She continues to run workshops and serves as a consultant for language educators, and is so kind and sharing and giving of her resources So she continually shares on social media all things, new ideas. So I wanted her assessment resources have tons of templates, ideas, strategies, where you could even go for more. So I wanted to share that as well because she's a big source of inspiration for me. And I want to give her credit because she's a gold mine. You will go on her site and you will be like, oh my gosh, you can spend hours with her information there. So I put those in there. Also, she has a new resource that I love on asking your students for input on your unit plan. So seeing what they want to learn about it before you even dive in. Like, hey, what do you already know about this topic? What questions do you have? And then taking their feedback and then structuring your unit around what they actually want to know instead of what you might think is interesting or important. So those are just some little resources I wanted to leave with you all. And obviously, before we go to Q&A, because I don't want to forget to show you the code to get the materials and a thank you, but you can access all our materials here at this bit.ly. It's just bit.ly, so bit.ly/capital T, lowercase I, capital S, assess, and that will give you our presentation and all the materials, or you can simply scan the bit.ly, the code, and that will take you there as well. I will actually exit it for a second so I can grab that link very fast for you. There we go. Let's copy that, and I will put myself back in full screen and drop that to you. Yeah, I'm going to drop this link right now that I'm putting in the chat is how you can access the materials. So if you click that link that is right here on the screen or in the chat right now, and for those of you watching at home, don't worry, we'll make sure you have a PDF version as well that you can get at a later, that you'll get when the recording comes out. So that will be there for you. But now we'll open it back up to Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free, drop them in the chat or the Q&A box, and Veronica will start sharing those with us, and I will be happy to answer. And it doesn't have to be about assessment and feedback. You all are welcome to ask anything. So go ahead, start hitting me up with questions. I'm ready.
Thanks, Heidi.
Of course.
No questions yet, but certainly we are able to take them when you are ready. I know we've went a little bit over time, but it's been so wonderful and engaging.
Thank you. Like, if you have any questions, don't feel shy. And if you want to just send them to host and presenter, you can do it that way, and then we can share it out. If you don't want to post it to everybody, you have that option as well. Okay, great question. I see we just got one that came in. And the question is, do you use any particular strategies with common errors that students tend to make again and again? So what I do is I mostly do grammar in context. I don't teach grammar directly. It's all indirect. It's in context. I'll do a pop-up lesson. If I notice we're making an error, there will be pop-up grammar. Also, I may include it in a warm-up, but I'm not going to automatically correct a student in class when they're speaking because I want real, authentic language in the classroom and I don't want to discourage anyone. So I would say the best way is address it as a whole class, either through a warm-up or through an activity you design, but doing it with kindness in mind as to not shut down their language acquisition process. All right, we've got one both in Q&A and in chat I see coming up.
This is from Tamara, and Tamara asked, do you have a favorite book that details backward design model or creating a unit of study?
All right, so I would recommend anything by Wiggins and McTighe. Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe are amazing. They also did a lot of work with Carol Ann Tomlinson, who is actually from my town. I did not know that till I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. She taught where I went to school, like where I was all in elementary school through high school. And she is a big proponent as well as backwards design and differentiated instruction. So if you look for Tomlinson, and I can even put this in an additional resource doc for you all, but Tomlinson, Wiggins, McTighe, they're phenomenal. Actful also has books as well on their website, especially with IPA design, which does a lot of backwards design as well, that I would recommend. But Wiggins and McTighe are the go-tos that I use.
Thanks so much, Heidi.
Of course. All right. Oh, we got something else coming.
No, I don't see any other question. Oh no, maybe I do in the Q&A actually. Yeah. So from Janet, how do you deal with students who will not engage? The one she's thinking of has a learning disability in reading.
Okay, so what I would do with that student or any students who are not engaging, I would find ways, and it may be that they start nonverbal as first, whether they're giving you some kind of cue that they understand. Maybe you make gestures for them that they can use, that they would show, yes, they're with you. Maybe they're just not comfortable to engage that way. But hey, if they make like a thumbs up, yeah, I got it. Or they make like a heart that shows, yes, I agree. Thumbs down, maybe I don't agree. I don't understand. Like there's all kinds. And if you look for La Maestra Loca on social media or on her blog, she blogs a lot about using nonverbal cues with learners and how you can use those for those students who may not engage verbally or in writing with you yet, for them to start showing you their comprehension. And yes, that they really are acquiring language, but they're just doing it at their pace. And when they're ready, they will start joining in. So I would recommend first using nonverbal cues with that student. Other
Thank you for that,
questions?
Heidi.
If anyone,
Wonderful.
I will advance us. Then it looks like questions. Again, here's my contact info. If you need it, you can send follow-ups either to me on social media, on my email. You can check out my website. It has literally every presentation I've ever given there. So you have access to that. They're all there free and available for you to grab and look at. And again, there is that bit.ly if you need it again to get the resources from this session. And then
Thank
we
you
have
so
our
much,
closing
Heidi.
slide. There you go.
Lovely. Thank you so much,
Of
Heidi, for that
course.
really insightful presentation. We really absolutely appreciate your time and expertise. And before we do wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts and share any of your takeaways on your preferred social media channels. You can find all of our social media links at This Is School, including X, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And you can also visit our website, which is www.thisisschool.com. For those interested in learning more about using This Is School as part of your teaching toolkit and making the most of our 14-day trial, you can request that on our website. Again, that is www.thisisschool.com, where you can request a trial and we'll be in contact with you to organise that. One final reminder that this webinar series is the first of 4. So it's not over yet. We have 3 more sessions lined up, each packed with just as valuable information as you have had today. You can join us for free, as was today, and you can find more information about upcoming webinars and sessions on our website. So huge thank you again to all of you for being part of today's webinar. Really appreciate you interacting and all of your questions and feedback. We will be sending the recording out next week with any further information that you would like. And we look forward to seeing you on future sessions. So have a great day, everyone, and happy Saturday. Thank you again.
Thank you all so much. Enjoy your weekend and feel free to connect at any time if you have questions. And I look forward to our next session.
Thank you all.